there YouTube, what's up? My name is Farid from Lil Pop Studios and you're watching VFX with Reed. I'm not showing my face. Lil Pop Studios. Recently, the movie Shang just got released about 3 to 4 days ago, and there's one effect inside the video which really intrigued me. That's the 10 rings, and I think that's what we're going to be recreating today. So let's get into it. Blagging. Yes, I'm blagging. Please, I'm not the youngest YouTuber. We have a YouTuber who is 5 or 6 years extra. That's he even has the most viewed channel in the whole world. Yeah, almost like 8 years. Sorry for the interruption. How we're going to create this effect, we don't have a costume for it, so I think I'm just going to take my shirt off and leave my singlet to my 6 packs. I'm about to take off my shirt and I'm giving the camera to Mr. Ahmed. So to just bring your tripod. I didn't want to bring the tripod. Now, since we are using a low quality camera, we need to 3D track our footage in post-production, but since we don't have a quality camera, I decided to bring this so we can create tracking points.
Starting off, we wouldn't be needing any tracking points, I found out in post-production, so please do away with tracking points.
The moment I'm done with this, then we now go into the shots. The shot is nothing special. You can use a handheld shot or you can use a tripod. It depends on what you want. So since we are doing everything on a low budget, we are going to be using a handheld, and I have Mr. Isaac with me to help me. I think I'm done with tracking. Let's get into the shots.
With the shots, I had only one take of it, and that was because I was running far behind time. So I decided to measure my height by letting my junior brother raise his hand, and then I'll try to get the correct framing. And it worked too, but if you have a tripod, you can use a tripod. I would advise that you use a tripod. That's going to be the best idea. Right after the shots, what we need to do first is we need to model our ring in Cinema 4D. But before I go into that, I would like to thank you for clicking on this thumbnail and watching this video. If you haven't subscribed, I would advise you do so and turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I post exciting content like these. So let's now move into Cinema 4D and start our modeling. For the 3D model, I wouldn't go that in depth. That's because this is not a 3D lesson, this is an After Effects lesson. But all I did was I created a torus, then I reduced the subdivisions to somewhere 7. Then I now decided to cut some parts out and intrude, or I extruded some parts inside and added a subdivision to smoothen some parts. And then I added a golden kind of material and I had a texture of black and white, then I added it to the side. So now we are done with the ring modeling in Cinema 4D, and then we now have to move into After Effects and start our compositing. First things first, since we are working with 3D, we need to 3D track our footage. Right after the track is done, what I'll do is I'm going to right click on any of the track points and create a new text and camera. And that's because I would have to check whether my track has been made well. So in this instance, my track has been tracked well, so I don't have any problems with it. In order for us to work well in Cinema 4D, we would have to create references. So I'm going to right click on 2 of the nulls inside my track and I'm going to create new solids. Then I'm going to position them and rotate them as the same way as my ground plane. That's going to help me when I'm doing compositing in Cinema 4D. And I'm going to right click and create some nulls again to help me when I'm doing my compositing in Cinema 4D again. After this, we'll have to export it as a Cinema 4D file, so we'll have to click on the file menu, move to export and click on Maxon Cinema 4D exporter. Disregarding the dialog box, we just click on OK and save our Cinema 4D file wherever we want it to be. Before we then open Cinema 4D, we would have to import our Cinema 4D file that we just created into our composition, just to give us a reference when we are working in Cinema 4D. You'd understand when we enter into Cinema 4D. Now when you open that project file we created inside Cinema 4D, you'd find out that all our solids and our nulls that we created back in After Effects and our camera movements are all recorded inside Cinema 4D. That's going to help us a lot when we are doing compositing. So you can decide to trim your footage to your desired time, and we'll continue with what we are doing. Now it's time to bring in the OBJ ring or the C4D ring that we created back in the beginning into our Cinema 4D file, which is very simple to do. After our ring has been imported inside Cinema 4D, you'd find out that anything that we do inside Cinema 4D and we save it, it's going to be reflected inside Adobe After Effects. Note, that does not count when you have to render inside After Effects. You would have to render anything that you're doing in Cinema 4D and bring it into After Effects and do the compositing before you can now render it out as a real time or a rendered footage. So then from there, you'd have to mark the point at which your rings are supposed to appear, and that's where we are going to start our animation from. With mine, I had my animation starting from the 238th frame, that's if I'm right. So since every human being is not perfect, you can decide to create a backup for your camera in case you mess up. So now we are going to position our ring in a desired point and keep looking inside After Effects to find whether it fits inside our composition. When we find that, that's when we'll now create a keyframe for the position, move back for at least 5 or 10 frames and move the ring outside to create something like the ring is moving in. Then you can now duplicate your ring for about 5 times, vary the sizes and do the animations for all of them anyhow you want them to be. It depends on your creative mind. You own your own virtual reality. So during the rendering, you'd have to turn on motion blur. You can turn on global illumination or ambient occlusion. It depends on you. Since this was a very simple project, I didn't want to use any renderer, so I just used the physical renderer, which made my work so very fast. I had to render about 430 something frames, and that took me almost just like 50 seconds. So I think you can just use only the physical renderer because this is not some kind of a serious project. But if you're using a serious project or you're working on a serious project, I'd advise that you get some renderers like Octane, Corona, and just a note, when you're rendering, you'd have to render it as a PNG sequence and turn on alpha channel to make your PNG transparent. That's a point to note, you don't have to forget it. First off, when we open Adobe After Effects, we are going to delete the two solids that we created, and then we are going to import our render as a PNG sequence, and that's very simple to do. Whenever you are importing it, what you just do is you tick the PNG sequence during the importing, and that's it. Then we are going to place it inside our composition at the right place where it's supposed to be. Then we are going to duplicate our render and add the optical glow effect from Red Giant. I'll be leaving a link in the description. Then I'm going to change the glow colors to orange, and then I'm going to tweak with the values, making sure that the glow is intense inside and extend it's very light at the outside parts of it. I then created an adjustments layer, added the exposure effect and the brightness and contrast effect. I increased the contrast a bunch and reduced the exposure a bunch to give me a feel of a night look. And then I decided to create a reflection for the rings, so I decided to create a new solid with the color orange. Then I masked out the parts where I wanted it to be reflecting on the ground, and then I made it 3D and positioned it and rotated it so it would be lying down on the floor. Then I animated opacity so that it would move from 0 to about 30 when the rings come in, and when the rings go out again, they'll move from 30 to 0. Looking at my render, I found out that it wasn't really fitting into the scene, so I decided to make it 3D, scaled it and positioned it in a way that it will look more fitting into the scene. So then I created an adjustments layer. I then masked out the parts at which I wanted some kind of a flame or a turbulent displace to be. Then I now went into the effects panel and searched for the turbulent displace effect. I came and added it to that adjustments layer, and then I made the amount somewhere 10 and the size 20. Then I now I faded the mask a bunch so it wouldn't really look that obvious, and I made the layer 2 3D, and I decided to create keyframes for position so it will move as my hand moves or the ring moves. I created a new orange solid, and then I changed the blending mode to soft light and reduced the opacity to give me a feel of fire. Next, I wanted to add some energy waves, but since I don't have money to buy energy waves, I decided to pick some free shock waves I had from the internet, and then I blasted them upon each other and I created myself an energy wave. Then I brought them into my composition and changed the blending mode to screen. I then added the tint effect and mapped the white to orange to give me some kind of orange energy effect. Then I changed the blending mode to screen. I think I already said that. Made that 3D. Then I created keyframes for position so that they will move with the rings and kind of looks like it's the rings that carry the energy wave. As simple as that. Next, I created a black solid, added the lightning effect to it, and then I changed the lightning mode to two-way strike. I then changed the color from blue to orange, and then I tweaked with the values anyhow I wanted it to be. Changed the blending mode to screen, and then I created animations for the lightning so it will look as if the lightning comes in as the rings also come in. It's always your creative mind, so you can do whatever you want. You are an arena of limitless possibilities. Then I added the Gaussian blur effect to give it some kind of a subtle lightning or a subtle lightning. Next, I created a new solid and then I masked out to make it look like light rays from my hands through the rings to the ground. And I added the directional blur and much. I had to increase the value so much so it would look like light rays. I then changed the blend mode to screen, and then I added the Gaussian blur to make it look kind of a little bit smooth, and then I reduced the opacity or animated the opacity to come in as the rings also come in. I then created position keyframes, yes, to make it follow the rings and make it look very simple. So my background looked too raw, so I decided to download some stock images from the internet. I downloaded a plane crash and I downloaded a log of wood. Then I did some color grading and some matte painting inside After Effects. I would not go in depth into that. If you need a tutorial on that, just leave it in the comment section. I'll be glad to attend to you. After Effects crashed along the line, but I had an autosave, so I was saved. Jesus saved me. To tie the scene more into the scene I was trying to portray, I decided to download some embers and some smoke and some other assets and added it into the scene to tie it more to some kind of a war scene. Now we're done with everything we need to do in After Effects. I sent it into Premiere Pro, then I did some color grading, did some sound design. I even added a couple of speed drums, and then I finished my effect. But before we see that effect, I would like to make sure that you've subscribed and turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I post exciting contents like these again. After Effects 101 is still running. I posted the first course and I'm having a couple of interactions. I have about 95 views on that video. I'm waiting for 100 views, so I'll post the second course. So if you're interested inside After Effects 101, I'll be leaving links in the description so you go and learn After Effects straight from scratch. And if you have already watched the first one, make sure it reaches 100 by the end of next week, and I'll be glad to post the next tutorial. So let's now move into what we created.
And we're done. Thank you for reaching till this part of the video. I think we are now going home. We just forgot to shoot this part, so I just decided to come and shoot this part. And we found some new friends. This one, I don't know his name, he's silent but he likes money. This one, I know him, he's a womanizer. This one, I also know him, and I don't know whether he likes girls. Do you like girls? Okay, he doesn't like girls. So, yep, you can follow me on Instagram at Leopard Studios. Then with just 2 CDs, you can support me on Patreon at Leopard Studios. What's wrong with my eyebrows? Till next week, get some creative ideas and make it real.